My fiancé, who had been emotionally distant for 3 whole years, publicly proposed to his first love at a grand event in Hong Kong, one that happens once in a decade. Later, I sweetly announced in my social circle, "We're getting married." But he called me in the dead of night, saying, "Victoria, I never said I'd marry you." I replied with a smile, "I never said the groom was you." Then, a set of photos went viral online, shocking the entire city. The powerful man in Hong Kong, with open arms, allowed me to fall into his embrace and even lowered his head, letting me kiss him. When I stood up in my evening dress, the makeup artist couldn't help but whisper, "Victoria, you look stunning in that dress." I thanked her softly. However, as I pushed open the door, there was quite a commotion downstairs. In the enormous golden revolving door, my ex-fiancé Jaden, who I had been engaged to for 3 years, appeared publicly with a young and beautiful woman. Even more absurdly, her dress was identical to mine. Tonight was a rare grand event in Hong Kong, and everyone present was at the top of the social pyramid. Sharp-eyed and shrewd, they immediately recognized that my dress was a high-quality knockoff. It was the first time in 21 years that I had dressed up so extravagantly. Turns out, I was just a well-dressed fool. "Jaden, who is this lady with you?" Someone from the crowd spoke up. Jaden held the woman's hand and said, "This is my girlfriend Mia, but after tonight, she will be my fiancée." "What about Victoria?" Jaden looked at me coldly and said, "The engagement with the Hodge family has been dissolved. In these 3 years, the Amelia family has already done everything possible for the Hodge family." He wasn't wrong. Without the 1 billion engagement dowry from the time of our betrothal, the Hodge family would have gone bankrupt long ago. Would my parents, siblings, and I still be enjoying our current lavish lifestyle? Jaden got down on one knee and proposed to Mia with a diamond ring. She cried uncontrollably and threw herself into his arms. He gently wiped her tears, soothing her with kisses. I watched as Mia was surrounded by flattering socialites and ladies, engaging in lively conversation. After tonight, she would no longer be a small-time star, or a disgraced third party, and I, Victoria, would have no place in Hong Kong, or the Hodge family. "Could you move aside?" A voice came from behind me. I turned to see 2 socialite-looking girls holding snacks, impatiently staring at me. I stepped aside. "Her dress is so cheap." "Yeah, such a knockoff. It must be made from some material that could cause an allergic reaction. She has the nerve to stand here. It's really embarrassing." Expressionless, I walked to a corner of the resting area, pretending not to hear their malicious comments. My phone rang, and I answered it. My mother's angry voice came through, "Victoria, the Amelia family wants to cancel the engagement and return 50 million. In 3 years, you couldn't even hold on to a man's heart. You're really useless. Figure out how to get the 50 million yourself. The Hodge family doesn't have a single penny." I looked at the hung-up phone, feeling like my heart was suffocating. All this dazzling, glamorous world had nothing to do with me. I just wanted to escape quickly. "I heard Jackson returned to Hong Kong yesterday, and will attend the banquet tonight." "That's unlikely. Jackson rarely attends such events." "That's true. After all, the last time he appeared publicly was on the news at the main station." I pressed on my aching heart, and fumbled through my bag for medication. The rustling noise caught the attention of the 2 talking women, and their conversation abruptly ceased as they walked away. The pain in my chest intensified, and the tight dress felt like it was suffocating me. I couldn't continue searching for medication. I tried several times to unfasten the hidden hooks for a deep breath, but each attempt was unsuccessful. Today, Debbie Hodge's mother had arranged for my new manicure. It was exquisitely done, but seemed almost fatal at this crucial moment. I tilted my face up to take small breaths, my long hair falling messily around me, my lips turning pale. Not far away, the banquet had just begun. My former fiancé and his beloved were likely dancing sweetly together, and I might quietly die on this quiet deck. "Jackson, are you coming in now?" Jackson didn't respond but took the cigarette case from his secretary. He took out a light gray cigarette and opened a small, exquisite box. He dipped the cigarette lightly into the deep reddish-brown powder and then dusted off the cigarette before reaching for the lighter from the secretary. Jackson lit the cigarette. "You all go ahead. I'll finish this cigarette first," Jackson said, taking a few steps toward the deck railing. It's windy here. Be careful. The crowd around him discreetly dispersed. This time back in Hong Kong, Jackson was determined to advance further. From now on, in the entire Hong Kong, if he said one thing, no one would dare to say two. Tonight's event had been arranged to ensure he made an appearance. He had no real interest in it, but having been pressured by family elders to get married after returning to Hong Kong, he decided to take this opportunity to relax a bit. But halfway through the cigarette, Jackson noticed the frail figure not far away. He stubbed out the cigarette and turned to leave, but he heard a muffled sound on the deck. Jackson slowly looked back. In the dim moonlight, the figure was lying on the deck, exuding an endless allure. My face was likely ashen and ghostly pale. The dim moonlight revealed a face that had lost its beauty, only slightly twisted. Seeing the unfamiliar man before me felt like grabbing a lifeline. I clutched at his sleeve with all my might. Survival instinct gave me incredible strength. I managed to pull his arm close to my chest. My breathing was rapid and frightening, and my heartbeat was erratic. He looked at me, seeming to understand my discomfort. He knelt on one knee, his long fingers gripping my wrists firmly as he calmly asked, "Where is the zipper on your dress?" I couldn't speak, struggling to keep his hand pressed to my chest. He furrowed his brows, removed my hand, and looked at the neckline of the dress. Then, he deftly undid the row of hidden hooks. I felt a sudden lightness as the binding pressure on my chest and lungs disappeared. Air rushed in, and I greedily took deep breaths. But I had completely forgotten that my dress was fitted with only a petal-shaped adhesive bra on the front. Now that the front of my dress was wide open, I was completely exposed, until a heavy men's suit, carrying warmth, draped over me. I suddenly came to my senses. I bit my lip, took a while to lift my head, and said softly, "Thank you. Can you stand up?" I nodded, holding onto the suit with one hand and the railing with the other, barely managing to steady myself. "Do you want me to contact your family or friends?" I quickly shook my head. "No need. I'll be fine after resting for a bit." His phone suddenly rang. I saw him step aside and answer it. I said, "I'll handle the wedding arrangements. Don't worry, I won't let my grandfather leave this world with regrets." He seemed a bit irritated, lit a cigarette. The flickering cigarette tip illuminated his stern profile. I suddenly felt like I had seen him somewhere before. At that moment, he also turned his gaze to meet mine. I quickly looked down. He put away his phone and walked back toward me, the strong smell of cigarette smoke lingering. I coughed uncomfortably. "Sorry." He gentlemanly extinguished the cigarette. He pointed to the suit on me. "Just give the clothes to the service staff." My face turned red again, and I nodded quietly. "Okay." His gaze fell on my fingers. I was tightly gripping his suit jacket. Underneath, my dress was open, with my bare skin only covered by a silicone bra, pressing against the fine lining of the men's suit. It was an intimate situation known only to me. I slightly curled my chest, feeling uneasy. As he was about to turn and leave, I spoke softly. "Earlier, I heard your phone call. Could we make a deal?" I gathered my courage and looked up at him. Perhaps he needed a wife who caused no trouble, and could disappear at any time. And I needed 50 million to gain a sliver of freedom. A deal. Victoria wants to make a deal with me. I was so nervous that I didn't notice he knew my name. "Do you need a wife?" I summoned my courage and looked at him firmly. "I won't cause you any trouble and will cooperate fully. Of course, if you don't need me, I won't cling to you." He looked at me under the moonlight, his silver gray shirt and dark trousers, enveloping his lean but upright figure. His brows were unremarkable, but his jawline was sharp. I saw the watch on his wrist, which could probably buy the luxury cruise I was on. "What are your conditions?" I hesitated, then said slowly, "I need 50 million. For what?" I lowered my eyelashes, not daring to meet his gaze. But in front of a stranger, I felt I could boldly reveal my awkwardness and helplessness. "The engagement was cancelled. I need to return half of the dowry, 50 million, which I can't come up with." "Cancelled the engagement?" He suddenly looked at me, with an unusually sharp gaze. "Yes, cancelled the engagement." I gave a faint smile and raised my face. The sea breeze lifted my long hair, as I stared blankly into the darkness of the night. "I have no other way out, sir. I accept the deal, but I have one condition." I looked at him in disbelief. "Sir, Get the marriage certificate within 3 days. 3 days? That's so fast. You heard my phone call earlier. My grandfather's health isn't good, and he's eager to see a granddaughter-in-law. He raised an eyebrow. Is that inconvenient? I quickly shook my head. No, it's fine. Then it's settled. The sea breeze grew stronger, tangling my long hair and blowing it against my face. He suddenly stepped forward, brushing the stray hair from my face and tucking it behind my ear. I'll send someone to pick you up the day after tomorrow. But how do you know where I am? He didn't answer that question, and, as he withdrew his hand, it seemed like his fingertip lightly brushed my face. But it might have just been my illusion. He left, and I remained trapped in that surreal dreamlike state, until Jaden, who had been drinking, suddenly came over and grabbed my wrist. Victoria, I've been waiting for you to beg me for 3 years. If you're willing to soften up to me like those other women, not to mention 1 billion, I'll give you 10 billion. You're drunk. Jaden, I pushed him away with force, but dealing with a drunk was truly troublesome. His bloodshot eyes fixed on me, and then on the suit I was wearing. Whose clothes are you wearing? It's none of your business. Jaden. None of my business. His handsome face twisted slightly. Victoria, I want to see, who dares to touch Jaden's woman. He forcefully grabbed my suit and tore it open. I tried to hold on, but it was futile. The sea breeze roared, and under the moonlight, a white shimmer rose. Victoria, Jaden murmured in disbelief. In the next second, a sharp female voice rang out. Victoria, how shameless can you be? Oh my God, how can she unfasten her dress and seduce someone else's fiancé? Jaden's eyes are fixed on her. Mia, look at her level. I snapped back to reality, trying to cover the open part of my dress, but Mia was already crying and charging at me, raising her hand to slap me. What's going on here? A deep male voice suddenly calmed the scene. Mia's hand froze, and in the next moment, Jaden pulled her aside. I quickly took a step back and awkwardly raised my arms to cover my chest. The crowd turned to look, and someone exclaimed, "It's Jackson." Which Jackson? Who else could it be? It's Jackson. I widened my eyes, looking at Jackson beyond the crowd, the man who had helped me unfasten the tight dress on the deck, the man I had boldly asked to be my husband and give me 50 million. Turns out, he was the famous Jackson of Hong Kong. Jackson glanced at me once, and then looked away. He turned to his female secretary and said something. The secretary immediately walked through the crowd and put the suit jacket back on me. Victoria, let me take you somewhere to rest. I stiffly nodded in thanks. As she helped me leave, I couldn't help but look back. The crowd had quietly dispersed, and everyone stood respectfully and attentively. Jackson, it's a misunderstanding. Jaden, now sober, nervously tried to explain. What misunderstanding? Jackson's voice remained calm, showing no signs of anger. I slowly stopped at the corner. The secretary didn't rush me and patiently waited. Jaden's voice trembled. Mia is my girlfriend, and she must have misunderstood and reacted inappropriately. Jackson's eyes were sharp, showing displeasure. I don't believe there would be such a poorly raised person among the high society ladies in Hong Kong. Jaden was embarrassed, and Mia was on the verge of tears. Jackson instructed his staff, escort this young lady off the ship. Mia, please forgive me. Jackson, give her another chance. Mia clung to Jaden's sleeve, sobbing, knowing the seriousness of the situation. Being thrown off the ship would soon become the talk of the town in Hong Kong. She would be ridiculed and lose any chance of recovery. Jackson, Mia knows her mistake. Please give her a chance. Jackson looked at him coldly. You're welcome to leave the ship together. Jaden fell silent and withdrew his hand. Mia was quickly escorted off the ship. The crowd on the deck also quietly dispersed. No one expected the scene to end this way. Jackson, the secretary's voice suddenly pulled me back to reality. I looked up in surprise. Jackson was walking towards me. He waved for the secretary to leave and gently asked, Victoria, were you scared? I shook my head in a daze. No, I'll take you back to rest first. Jackson raised his hand and gently held my wrist. Is that okay? I, disoriented, nodded randomly and walked with him. But after taking just a few steps, I felt a chill in my chest. At that moment, a nude-colored petal-shaped adhesive bra fell from under the suit. Jackson looked back, his gaze following the fallen adhesive. I was so embarrassed I almost wanted to hide my face. He, however, remained composed, bending down to pick up the adhesive. He folded it and neatly placed it in his pocket before soothing me softly. It's too dirty to use again. I'll have someone bring clean clothes for you later. My face was flushed and hot, and I could barely manage a soft, let's go, Jackson said as he took my hand again. The corridor wasn't long, and we quickly reached the lounge. He dropped me off, and then left. I sat alone in the quiet for a while before I managed to calm down. But once I was calm, it hit me that Jackson had called me Victoria from the start, and just now, he called me Victoria again. He knows my name. He knows who I am. A female secretary arrived shortly with a change of clothes. I took a shower, changed into the clean clothes, and folded Jackson's suit jacket to put it in a bag. I planned to have it dry cleaned before returning it to him. The instructions from Jackson were to personally escort you, if you wanted to leave, said the secretary, who looked to be in her late 30s and was very efficient. I also need you to let Jackson know that I'm taking the clothes to be dry cleaned first. No trouble at all, Victoria, just leave it to me. I didn't insist further and handed her the bag, casually asking, how did Jackson know my name? The secretary merely smiled and said, that's a private matter for Jackson. When I got off the boat, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. Victoria, this is Jackson. Please save my number. I stared at the message for a while before replying. Okay, saved it. I'll pick you up the day after tomorrow. Rest well these next 2 days. He didn't send any more texts. When I got back to the Hodge house, it was already late at night, but everyone was still awake, and the house was brightly lit, though the atmosphere was heavy and oppressive. As soon as I walked in, my mother stood up immediately. Victoria, have you decided what to do? What did you do to make Jaden so angry that he wants to break off the engagement? Yes, Victoria, you know that our family depends on the Amelia family for business. How are we going to come up with 50 million now? Your sister-in-law is about to give birth to her 3rd child. Are you trying to kill us? Everyone was blaming me for not keeping Jaden's heart, for not getting married smoothly. They continued to drain us, but when they pushed me, the sickly younger daughter, out to marry, did they ever ask if I was willing? When they used the Amelia family's 100 million dowry to cover their lavish lifestyle, did I ever enjoy any of it? Now that the Amelia family wants to break off the engagement, they don't want a single cent, but expect me to bear the entire burden. Fine, I'm willing to bear it, but once I've done so, I will no longer be part of the Hodge family. Victoria, say something. My sister-in-law stood up and lightly nudged me in annoyance. I've already thought of a way to come up with 50 million. Really? You have a solution? My mother's eyes lit up immediately. However, it might damage our family's reputation. What do you mean? I smiled faintly and said, at tonight's dinner, I met a wealthy businessman from the Philippines. After learning about my difficulties, he's willing to pay the 50 million. However, he has a wife and children, so I would have to become his mistress. I had no other choice but to agree. But that means if I appear publicly with him, our relationship will no longer be a secret. How can you do such a shameful thing? Yes, our Hodge family has a scholarly tradition. We've had scholars and top candidates in the past. If you become a mistress, you'll ruin our family's reputation for generations. Then what do you suggest? Should you sell some assets to come up with 50 million for the Amelia family? For a moment, no one responded. The room fell silent. Victoria, my father, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. We cannot default on the 50 million owed to the Amelia family, and we cannot afford to lose face for the Hodge family. I sneered deliberately. Then why don't you just disown me as your daughter? My sister-in-law, holding her stomach, muttered softly, at least you're sensible. Here's the deal. My father finally made a decision. The Hodge family would publicly announce that they were severing ties with me, but it was only a formality. I would still be their daughter, and they wouldn't disown me. I knew this was just a tactic to placate me. As long as the 50 million was sent to the Amelia family, I would be immediately kicked out. But they didn't know that this was exactly what I wanted. At 9 the next morning, I received a call from Jackson. Victoria, Check your messages. The money should have arrived. I quickly checked the message and indeed, it had been deposited 10 minutes ago. I've received it. Handle the engagement cancellation today. I'll send a driver to pick you up. Jackson, could you do me a favor? What is it? Can you keep our wedding a secret for now? I didn't want the greedy vultures at the Hodge family to latch onto Jackson and create unnecessary trouble for him. You don't want people to know. Not really, just for now. Can you do that? Sure, I'll arrange for someone else to pick you up. Once the 50 million was returned to Jaden and the Hodge family announced their severance, Jackson could choose to make our marriage public or keep it private. Either way, I would cooperate fully. By then, the Hodge family's disowning me would ensure they couldn't bother Jackson anymore. After transferring the money to Jaden's account, I took a photo of the transaction receipt. When Jaden called, I saw the newspaper's notice about the Hodge family severing ties with me. I stared at those lines of text, reading them over and over. Then I took more photos and carefully saved the newspaper. Jaden's voice was hoarse on the phone. Victoria, where did you get the money? 50 million is a large sum. The Hodge family can't come up with it. Who gave it to you? Be clear. That's none of your business. We have nothing to do with each other from now on. With that, I was about to hang up, but Jaden suddenly called my name. Victoria, do you think I'm after the 50 million? No matter what you're after, it has nothing to do with me now. Victoria, you should know that if I don't relent, no man in the entire harbor city will dare to marry you. I laughed lightly on the phone. Is that so? If you don't believe me, feel free to try. I didn't want to waste more words with him, and hung up the phone. As soon as I hung up, the phone rang again. I was about to block the number when I saw 3 words on the screen. Jackson, Hodge family is severing ties with you. How did you know? I was surprised at how well informed Jackson was. Victoria, HMM. If you're feeling down, you don't have to hide it. I didn't want to cry at all. Really, I've been used to it since childhood, to the point of numbness. I'm not upset, but when someone shows concern, people often become particularly vulnerable. So when I spoke, my voice was already tinged with tears. Victoria, you can cry in front of me. After all, starting tomorrow, I'll be your husband. My tears couldn't help but fall. But before becoming my husband, I've arranged another role for you. What role? I whispered timidly. Jackson was silent for half a minute before responding. So, my current role is a 60-year-old Chinese businessman from the Philippines. And you are my mistress? Are you angry? On the phone, he seemed to sigh lightly. Victoria, see you tomorrow. Do we still need to register? I could clearly sense he was somewhat displeased earlier. Rest well today, and wear your most beautiful dress tomorrow. Jackson must have made arrangements in advance, so the whole process of getting the marriage certificate went very smoothly. After getting the documents, Jackson first took me to the hospital. He held my hand the whole time, which made us look quite affectionate. His grandfather was very ill, only managing a faint smile at me, looking somewhat comforted. I couldn't help but feel uneasy. To deceive an old man, who is about to pass away, he must love his excellent grandson dearly, and hope for his marital happiness. Yet he doesn't know that I'm not Jackson's true wife. After leaving the hospital, Jackson had an important meeting, so he sent the driver to take me back to get my luggage. The driver was an experienced old-timer, who had known Jackson since he was born. Though his hair was gray, he still looked energetic. When the Hodge family saw him getting out of the car and opening the door for me, they all assumed he was my benefactor. Because they despised my current status as a mistress, no one paid attention to me. I went upstairs to get my suitcase. Only my father said a few words to me. This is just a temporary measure. You should move out for a while. Victoria, once things settle down, we'll bring you back. I deliberately asked pitifully. How long will it take? It depends on the situation. Then you need to keep your word. Don't worry. As I left with my suitcase, I could clearly feel that everyone in the Hodge family breathed a sigh of relief. The driver took me to Jackson's private residence. The house wasn't very large but had a tranquil environment. There were no visible groups of housekeepers or servants, which made me feel relaxed. Mom, Mr. Jackson instructed that you should make yourself at home. He will return tonight. But at 8 o'clock that night, I received a call from Jackson. He needed to return to the mainland for an important meeting, and wouldn't be back until about a week later. If you're feeling bored, go out with friends, shop, or have some tea. Don't stay cooped up at home all day. I'll stay at my little apartment for a few days. It's close to Central and convenient for everything. I'll come to pick you up when I return. Okay. On the third day of Jackson's business trip, a volunteer I had worked with called to invite me to a small charity auction in the socialite circle. The theme, which I found very interesting, was a charity fundraiser for children with congenital heart disease. When I arrived, I saw many familiar faces. Among them was Mia. Although she was still dressed up, she looked noticeably unwell. It seemed that being kicked off the boat had a greater impact on her than I had imagined. Mia saw me too, but only sneered, and turned to talk to someone else. Is it true? She's become a mistress. Of course it's true. Her parents are so ashamed they've disowned her. Haven't you seen the newspapers? I heard her benefactor is almost 80, old enough to be her grandfather. Oh my God. How can such a person be invited to a charity event? Yes, we shouldn't associate with someone like that. Let's ask her to leave. The scene grew increasingly chaotic, and the socialite who invited me looked embarrassed. Victoria, perhaps you should attend another time. Not wanting to make things awkward for her, I stood up and prepared to leave. As I reached the door, I ran into Jaden. Victoria. I ignored him and continued walking. Jaden grabbed my wrist. Are you here to see me? I pulled my hand away. No, I just heard about your situation today. Jaden blocked my path again. Victoria, return the money. Why? I couldn't help but sneer. Isn't 50 million what you wanted? Victoria. Jaden's face darkened. I said if you yielded once, how should I yield? I pushed him away again. Should I kneel before you, and thank you like a dog? It's laughable. No one knows that the seemingly noble young master of the Amelia family privately loves to use money and power to demean people. My life may be worthless, but I'm not willing to be humiliated in that way. Victoria, you've tarnished your reputation. You need to consider the consequences. Jaden changed the subject. Being a mistress at a young age will ruin your reputation for life. This is my choice. Victoria, I'm giving you a way out. Oh, I don't need it. I bypassed him and continued walking. Jaden's voice came from behind me. Victoria, I'm giving you one last chance. Think it over, and come find me. I didn't look back. That night, I received a call from my landlord. He ordered me to move out that night. I didn't argue with him, packed my belongings, and went downstairs. But to my surprise, as soon as I reached the ground floor, I saw Jackson's car. The driver got out and took my suitcase. Mom, Mr. Jackson sent me to pick you up. Jackson, has he returned? He's catching an early flight back tomorrow morning. I felt my eyes suddenly well up. Has he finished his work? It was supposed to be a week, and today was only the 4th day. Mr. Jackson is worried you might feel wronged, and doesn't want to leave you alone. I'm fine. His work is important. Don't let it delay because of me. Sitting in the car, my feelings were all over the place. I couldn't describe the complex emotions. It felt like being abandoned by the whole world, yet suddenly owning a fortune that could rival nations. When I arrived at Jackson's place and had just entered my room, his call came through. Victoria. Jackson's voice carried a hint of exhaustion. I suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of shame. I deliberately tarnished my reputation to escape the Hodge family. He worked so hard, yet I kept causing him trouble. If I had stayed quietly at his home, none of these problems would have arisen. Jackson. I'm sorry. Victoria. Jackson sounded somewhat resigned. I'm not blaming you. Forget it. I'll talk to you properly when you get back. After hanging up, I saw a new friend request on Weshit. It was from Jackson, so I accepted it. He had only one post on his moments from 3 days ago, a photo of our marriage certificate. I couldn't see what others had commented. I could only see his responses to a couple of comments. Yep, we're married. Introducing my wife, Victoria. That night, I posted a simple status update on my own moments. Getting married. Many people left comments asking about it, and friends called me. When I answered, it was Jaden's voice. Have you figured it out? I said I'd give you a chance, but I never said I'd marry you. I couldn't help but laugh. I never said the groom was you. You're marrying that old man. Victoria. You're willing to lower yourself to be with a man with a wife and children. I hung up and blocked his number. That night, my mind was racing with thoughts, and I couldn't fall asleep no matter how I tried. I only managed to drift off just before dawn. So, I didn't even notice when Jackson came home. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw a figure emerging from the bathroom. I was so startled that I almost screamed, my heart racing. It's me, Victoria. It's Jackson. Don't be afraid. I struggled to calm my pounding heart, and my face felt a bit pale. Jackson held me close and gently stroked my back. Breathe slowly. Don't be nervous. Relax. It's okay, Victoria. I rested against his chest, slowly regaining my composure. Once I had calmed down, I suddenly realized I was wearing only a silk nightgown, and Jackson, freshly out of the shower, was bare-chested and wearing only pajama bottoms. I'm fine now, I said quietly, my face flushed, gently pulling away from his embrace. I'm sorry I startled you. Jackson gently smoothed my disheveled hair. Why did you sleep for so long? I had some insomnia last night. I felt a bit awkward. My nightgown was very thin, and I never wear underwear to bed. Earlier, being held so closely by him, with just a thin layer of fabric between us made my face burn with embarrassment. Clutching the blanket, I wanted to wrap myself up, but felt it might make things worse. Before I could decide what to do, Jackson guided me back to bed. Get some more rest. It's almost noon already, so we might as well have lunch. He naturally tucked the blanket around me. I'll go to the study for a bit, and come back to wake you up. Watching him leave, I sighed with relief. During the day, he was mostly busy in the study with work, but by 9 at night, when he returned to the master bedroom, he showed no signs of leaving. I had thought about fulfilling marital duties after marriage. After all, I had promised to cooperate with his needs. I watched Jackson come out of the bathroom. After hesitating for a while, I gently asked, "Are you sleeping here tonight?" Jackson glanced at me but didn't reply. I wondered if maybe Jackson only needed a nominal wife. Perhaps I was overthinking it. I picked up a pillow and got out of bed, tentatively suggesting, "Then should I sleep in the guest room?" He remained silent. I turned to leave, but was suddenly embraced from behind. "Didn't you say you would fully cooperate with my needs?" Jackson, my back pressed against his solid chest. I could feel his heart pounding. His skin seemed to be burning, making me feel a bit dizzy. Jackson lowered his head, gently pushing aside the hair from my neck. "Victoria, you're my wife now." I leaned into his embrace, gently closing my eyes. I relaxed completely, letting him lift me and place me on the soft bed. When he bent down to kiss me, my fingers clutched tightly onto his forearm. My heart raced so fast it felt like it might stop. The kiss inevitably became intermittent. "If you're uncomfortable, let me know." Jackson touched my flushed face, and after my heartbeat gradually calmed, he continued. There were several times when I genuinely felt like I was about to suffocate, but Jackson always managed to stop at just the right moments. I could feel his tense muscles subtly quivering. Sweat droplets fell from his forehead onto my chest, burning hot. His heart was pounding intensely, and his breathing was rapid. I was uncomfortable, and he seemed even more so. "Victoria," his voice was husky as he leaned in to kiss my face gently, "are you feeling any better?" I shook my head, then nodded. My eyes were already blurry, and my hands had somehow tightly grasped his neck. It felt like a push and pull, but more like an embrace. His eyes were filled with desire. For a brief moment, I even had the illusion that Jackson might actually like me. "Victoria," he leaned down again, his movements growing more intense. In the final moments, it felt like I lost consciousness for a couple of seconds. But it wasn't as painful as before. Instead, I felt like I was floating on a cloud, enveloped in soft, fluffy clouds, until Jackson woke me up. "Victoria, is there anything uncomfortable?" I shook my head again, but gently reached out to hold his waist. "There's a natural dependency for a woman on her first man." Jackson held me close. "Rest for a while, then we can take a shower," he said, his fingers resting on my chest. "Is your heart feeling all right?" "It's okay." I thought about the interruptions earlier. I couldn't help but quietly ask him, "Jackson, are you feeling uncomfortable?" He cupped my face and kissed me, his voice husky, "If you keep asking, You might actually make me uncomfortable. I don't want to. All right, no more questions. He didn't let go of me. I just want to kiss Victoria. I stopped speaking and obediently let him kiss me. But in my muddled thoughts, I wondered, when he calls me Victoria, it sounds so affectionate, but someone as serious and self-disciplined as him would probably only use that name in private. I never had a chance to confirm my guess, because the next morning, Jackson left early again. I knew he was extremely busy. With his position, there were countless things to handle, so I stayed home, trying not to add any more trouble for him. Although I stayed indoors, the days were unusually peaceful and serene. It was the first time in my 21 years that I felt the beauty of a tranquil life, not having to worry about being treated like a commodity, not feeling hurt by favoritism from my family. I didn't have to think about anything. I just focused on doing things that made me happy. I even picked up the piano that had been gathering dust for years, bought painting courses online, and started learning oil painting. After about a week of staying home, one afternoon, Jackson suddenly called me and said there was a party that evening that I should attend. He had already prepared a gown and jewelry, and a team of stylists would come to the house soon. Will you be coming tonight? I'll come over directly after I finish my work. What kind of party is it? Is it necessary to go? It's a charity fundraiser for children with congenital heart defect. I thought you'd want to attend. I was touched. The last charity fundraiser I missed due to me as malicious gossip was also for children with congenital heart defect. Jackson still remembered this. Since I have a congenital heart condition myself, I've always been concerned about this issue. I remember, even after getting engaged to Jaden, I continued to volunteer every month, visiting sick or disabled children in orphanages. But Jaden had ridiculed me. You're quite adept at seeking fame. But he didn't know that I wasn't doing it for fame. It was because I had suffered myself, and I wanted to help more children like me. Jackson, of course, I'd like to attend. But if you come over tonight, our situation won't be kept secret. I wondered if it would cause him trouble or negative effects. Victoria, from the start, you were the one who wanted to keep things private, not me. Jackson, I clutched my phone. Somewhat puzzled. I don't understand. Why? Why did he agree? Why had he never thought of hiding our marriage? Why was it specifically me? I'll answer you when we get home tonight. When I arrived at the event, I naturally drew many curious glances. What puzzled me a bit was that, since Jackson was attending the charity event, it must have been of high status. The Amelia family could attend, but the Hodge family surely could not. Yet Jaden was there. And so were the Hodge family members. When I walked in, the Hodge family was gathered around Jaden warmly, and my biological older sister, Debbie Hodge, looked at Jaden with a shy and burning gaze. Victoria, how dare you show your face here? Debbie Hodge exclaimed in surprise, and immediately, her mother came over with a stern face. Victoria, don't you know what kind of occasion this is? You're embarrassing us. What will others think of the Hodge family? I looked at the elegant and dignified lady in front of me, feeling indifferent. Wasn't it already announced that we've severed ties? So, I have no relation to the Hodge family anymore, and any embarrassment falls on the Hodge family. Everyone in Hong Kong knows you're my daughter. Then what should we do? Victoria, leave Hong Kong. Have your sponsor take you abroad, or back to the Philippines. Didn't Dad promise I'd be allowed to come back once the dust settles? Debbie Hodge's mother looked at me as if I were a fool. What are you dreaming about? The Hodge family genealogy has already removed you. Really? Of course, really. So, legally and by blood, I have no relation to the Hodge family. Correct. Okay. I turned to look around. I'm sure everyone heard what Debbie Hodge's mother said. Victoria, you should leave quickly. There's no need to make a scene and lose face. Debbie Hodge feigned a gentle demeanor. The young master from the Amelia family is here. Don't let it be a joke. Jaden then spoke up. Victoria, didn't you say you were getting married? Jaden, they have a wife and children in the Philippines, with mistresses all over the world. How could they truly marry her? So, your social media post that day was fake. Just as I was about to reply, Jaden stepped forward and grabbed my arm. Victoria, I'm asking you again. Before he could finish, the hall suddenly went silent. Jackson is here. How could Jackson attend such a small event? How would I know? But tonight is a treat, seeing Jackson in person. Why is Jackson heading this way? Oh my God, Jackson keeps looking this way. Is he looking at the Hodge family's young lady? It seemed that Debbie Hodge heard these remarks, and her face quickly turned red. Debbie Hodge's mother also showed an unmistakable look of joy. I turned to look at Jackson. He was still wearing a black business suit, looking very serious and unapproachable. In that moment, I felt a bit dazed. This man, whom I had only seen on TV and in newspapers before, now he was my husband. He had kissed me many times, and he called me Victoria. He was so gentle with me, like a particularly good husband. Victoria, Jackson spoke. This was the first time he called my name in public, not just Victoria, but in an intimate and personal tone. Victoria. Debbie Hodge's smile froze awkwardly. Debbie Hodge's mother looked stunned. Jaden's face was filled with shock. I shook off his hand. My eyes reddened with grievance. Jackson. He walked through the crowd and came straight to me. Today's dress is beautiful, and the makeup suits you very well. You look beautiful, Jackson. I wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Just as my tears were about to fall, Jackson embraced me in front of everyone. Well, I was just a few minutes late, and you were bullied. When he said the word bullied, his gaze swept over the crowd coolly. Debbie Hodge's mother turned pale, and Debbie Hodge instinctively moved behind her. Jackson's gaze finally settled on Jaden. Jaden, what were you discussing with my wife? The word wife from Jackson's mouth was like a bomb. The previously silent crowd erupted into uncontrollable murmurs. Jaden seemed incredulous and asked, wife? Yes, Victoria is my wife, Jackson's wife. As soon as Jackson finished speaking, Debbie Hodge's mother suddenly seemed to come to her senses, and hurried over to me, affectionately grabbing my arm. Victoria, my child, such a happy occasion. Why didn't you tell your mother? I pushed her hand away. Debbie Hodge's mother, I am no longer part of the Hodge family. Debbie Hodge's mother was taken aback and hurriedly said, there's no overnight grudge between mother and daughter. We can clear up any misunderstandings. I shook my head. There's nothing to discuss. I have no connection with the Hodge family anymore, as the family tree shows. Debbie Hodge's mother was sweating and anxiously looked at Jackson. Jackson, our Victoria is childish and still holding a grudge against me. I'll listen to my wife. Jackson held me close, his tone cold. If Victoria says there's no relation to the Hodge family, then there's no relation, Jackson. Debbie Hodge's mother looked devastated. Debbie Hodge's mother. Jackson suddenly spoke, as far as I know, the Hodge family hasn't donated a penny to charity in the past 10 years. Debbie Hodge's mother, upon hearing this, broke into a sweat, stiffly trying to refute but unable to utter a word. So, if they haven't donated any money, why do Hodge family members always squeeze into charity events? To seek fame and recognition. Truly shameless. Debbie Hodge's mother could no longer bear the embarrassment and hurriedly left with Debbie Hodge. Jackson held me. Victoria, let's go home. But we haven't donated to the children, I quietly reminded him. Jackson leaned down and kissed me. The secretary has taken care of it. Jackson. I'm feeling faint. In the dimly lit room, I felt dizzy. The familiar feeling of suffocation returned, and I clutched his arm, turning my face to breathe deeply. Jackson bent down, his forehead lightly touching mine. Victoria, I could feel his own struggle, but my body wasn't cooperating. Jackson, maybe you should marry a healthy wife. Victoria. Jackson's eyes held a rare seriousness. There are plenty of healthy women in the world, but what's wrong with you? He brushed the wet strands of hair from my forehead and said, Victoria, to me, you're the best. Jackson, if your health isn't good, we'll take our time to heal it. If Hong Kong can't treat it, we'll go to Beijing or Shanghai, or even abroad. And if it still can't be treated, Jackson bent down and gently kissed me. Then I'll practice abstinence and self-cultivation, which is just as well for managing a family and ruling a country. As the new year approached, Jackson finally found some free time. He took me to Beijing, where it's said that the best cardiovascular specialists are currently located. I was quite nervous when we went for the checkup. We'll just do our best and leave the rest to fate, he said. Jackson habitually helped me arrange my hair. Go ahead. I'll be right here waiting for you. After all the detailed and professional tests were completed, the elderly expert with a full head of white hair looked at me with a sigh. I've reviewed your report. You're not among the more severe cases of congenital heart disease. If you had undergone surgery earlier in your childhood, you would have already recovered. I stared at the doctor in disbelief, shaking my head repeatedly. Doctor, are you sure you've got the right patient? My family has always told me that my condition was untreatable. They took me to many hospitals, and it was always the same story. Eventually, I refused to go to any more hospitals, and I couldn't bear to hear myself being condemned over and over. They told me that the only thing I could do was to live with this condition as best as I could, and that surviving and growing up was all thanks to them. When Jackson held me, I realized that I had unconsciously shed a lot of tears. They lied to me, didn't they? Why did they lie to me? Why treat me this way? If they didn't want to treat me, they could have given me away, or sent me somewhere else. Why deceive me? Deceive me for so many years. Victoria, don't dwell on these questions. Being able to regain your health is more important than anything else. You know that. I just don't understand. Jackson held me tighter. Then don't think about those meaningless things. Let's look forward and not look back. When spring arrived, Jackson came to pick me up and take me back to Hong Kong. By then, I had already been discharged from the hospital and was recovering well. A few days prior, his grandfather had fallen critically ill, and Jackson had rushed back to Hong Kong to the hospital. It wasn't until the day before yesterday, when his grandfather had stabilized again after nearly passing away, that Jackson was able to relax. We hadn't seen each other for a full half-month. Jackson got out of the car but did not come towards me. We had agreed on this beforehand. When we met again, I was to run to him, just like any healthy girl would. He opened his arms. I lifted the hem of my dress, and ran down the steps, through the green and yellow of the spring garden, and lightly sprinted in the spring breeze. For the first time in 21 years, I ran like this. Even the slightly chilly spring wind felt warm. I threw myself into his arms without a care. I tilted my face up to kiss him, but today I was wearing flat shoes, and he was just too tall. I had to stand on my tiptoes, but he bent down, meeting my kiss. It's been nearly a year since I married Jackson, but that night, it was the first time I saw him lose control. He kissed the scar on my chest, the mark left from the surgery that was still quite clear and somewhat ugly. I didn't want him to see it, and tried to cover it with my hand, but Jackson wouldn't let me. Is it very ugly? It's just as beautiful as it was that night. So you were already intrigued by me from the start? No, even earlier than you think. When was that? Had you seen me before? Victoria, are you sure you want to reminisce with your husband at this moment? Jackson held my hands and leaned down again. Jackson, I feel so dizzy. I can't breathe. I used my old trick again. He naturally didn't believe me, but still stopped at the most intense moment. My heart raced quickly, but it no longer twisted in pain. My chest surged with unstoppable waves of emotion. I wrapped around him and gently bit his chin. Jackson, you don't need to worry about my body anymore. From now on, you can do whatever you want. I had seen Jackson being serious and focused while presenting at a conference in the Bay Area. I had also seen him smoothly and fluently conducting multinational meetings in English, French, and Cantonese in the office. At home, he had a relaxed and easygoing side. Even the household staff dared to joke with him, but whenever he dropped his smile, everyone around him immediately fell silent. And now, in his eyes, there was a clear desire and a strong sense of possession. He let himself sink into passion, and together we fell into the tumultuous world of desire. In the endless pleasure, he seemed even more indulgent and immersed than I was. In the past, I couldn't understand why close people would treat me this way, but later, I realized, all the suffering and grievances over those 21 years were just to lead me to meet Jackson again. Jackson, are you? It was the first time I asked. Before I could finish, Jackson seemed to know what I was about to ask. His kiss fell on my ear, and his warm fingers intertwined tightly with mine. I heard his voice, husky and seductively deep. Victoria, I love you. End of story. **Epilogue. Jackson's perspective. When Victoria was 16, she often spent weekends and holidays doing volunteer work. During puberty, many girls are in a somewhat awkward stage due to development, but Victoria had already grown into a very beautiful and charming young woman. Due to her illness, she was naturally reclusive. This made her even more of an outsider. The first time Jackson saw her, he was accompanying his grandfather to the church for prayers. She was a volunteer who brought children from the welfare home to participate in the choir. When the children were singing, she played the piano in a white dress. When it was time for a group photo after the performance, she, who should have stood in the middle, was pushed to the corner. She did not fight or argue, quietly standing at the back and taking the photo. No one would notice such a small incident, but his grandfather suddenly said to him, "Look at that little girl playing the piano. She is so young but so composed." Because of this, he looked at her a few more times. He was 24 at the time, full of ambition and determination to make a name for himself. His mind was entirely focused. At that time, he only had a faint impression. She looked lovely in her dress. The second time he saw her was at her engagement ceremony with Jaden. Because his grandfather had some connections with the Amelia family, and they had invited him several times, he naturally had to show up. He attended the engagement ceremony that day. Many people were discussing the day's heroine, but there were two sides to the conversation. One was that Miss Hodge was indeed beautiful, but unfortunately in poor health. The other was that although the Amelia family didn't lack $1 billion, the Hodge family, being somewhat impoverished, seemed to be at a disadvantage despite Victoria's beauty. He didn't know why, but he became interested and looked up at the stage. Victoria was still wearing a beautiful white dress, but she looked lifeless, like a meticulously dressed doll, with no vitality or spirit in her eyes. He thought back to that very hot summer. The children in the choir sang with innocent voices like heavenly music. The young girl at the piano, gentle and quiet, standing in the last row of the corner, also smiling peacefully. Her eyes were very dark and bright, still holding a gleaming light. And that person on the stage, manipulated and stiff, could not compare. When Jaden kissed her, he didn't know why, but he suddenly turned away. As his work became increasingly demanding, he rarely thought of that person he had met only twice. Occasionally, during leisure or family gatherings, the name Victoria would come up. She really is quite unfortunate. First, she was sold by her family, and now the young master of the Amelia family doesn't appreciate her. Yes, I heard that even though they've been engaged for 2 years, Jaden hasn't set foot in the Hodge family once. I think this marriage might be in trouble. Why did Jaden agree to the engagement in the first place? If it was for her beauty, why did he neglect her after the engagement? He stood behind a bush, holding his breath. I heard from a younger branch of the Amelia family that Jaden did have some interest in her at first, so when the Hodge family made an exorbitant demand, he accepted. But Victoria, with her poor health, had a questionable private life? No way. I've seen Victoria several times. We often did volunteer work together, and she really seemed like a good girl. It was her older sister, Debbie Hodge, who let this slip. It shouldn't be false. What did she do that was inappropriate? It seems she was involved with many boys when she was around 16 or 17. Before her engagement with Jaden, she even had private meetings with other men in hotels. The Hodge family spent a lot of money to suppress it until after the engagement ceremony. Think about it. Jaden is such a proud person. How could he swallow this? So after the engagement ceremony, Victoria was sent back to the Hodge family. Jaden, out of embarrassment, had to cover up the scandal, but he has been deeply disillusioned with Victoria ever since. Then why didn't he just break off the engagement? Maybe he actually liked her, so he was unwilling to, but he was also conflicted by Victoria's actions. It must have been confusing for him. I still don't really believe Victoria would do such things. Are there any photos of her in those hotel meetings? Seems like I've seen them. I'll look for them. Cousin, why did you come over? Cousin. Hello, uncle. He suddenly emerged from the bushes. The girls were startled and quickly stood up, greeting him politely. His face was probably not very pleasant at the time, and the once lively garden instantly fell into an eerie silence. Have you finished your homework? Are you all here gossiping about others? The Pierce family has very strict family values, especially towards the girls. With a particularly rigorous upbringing, it's acceptable for the young girls to chat about gossip in private gatherings. But what they were discussing today was indeed over the line. If the elders had heard it, they would probably have resorted to disciplinary measures. The girls were so frightened that they were almost in tears. After he scolded them harshly, and made them promise to stop gossiping, he finally turned and left. For the next few days, his mood remained unsettled. That weekend, he had rare free time and accompanied his grandfather to the church again, and he happened to encounter her again, still in a simple dress, accompanying the children on the piano. But she looked even thinner, and her eyes seemed to always hold a layer of misty sadness. She played a wrong note and her face turned pale with panic, and the music stopped. Someone came over and reprimanded her without mercy. She sat there with her head down, looking like she was about to cry but didn't. Her subsequent playing was flawless. He couldn't help but keep looking at her. He even thought that if tears fell from her eyes, he would definitely get up and walk over. But she ultimately didn't cry. When leaving, he couldn't help but turn back and quietly ask the pastor to pass on a message to her. Your piano playing in that dress was really beautiful. I hope you can be a little happier. And later, that night at the Grand Hong Kong event, a momentary decision led to a lifetime of destiny. The moment he unfastened the hidden buttons of her dress, he had already decided, no matter the cost, he would take her away from Jaden and marry her. But he didn't expect that she would. He held back his increasingly intense heartbeat, and calmly stated his condition. Within 3 days, he wanted to register their marriage. The moment she agreed, he was as happy as he had been in his youth. When he helped her arrange her hair, she didn't know how much self-control he had to maintain. He refrained from kissing her abruptly. He let her wear the most beautiful dress, and go with him to get the marriage certificate. He would gradually bring back the most beautiful Victoria from his memories. Fortunately, he ultimately got what he wished for. The end. Thank you for reading. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for the latest updates. We publish a large number of novels daily.